Okay, we are in for our final eclipse of this year's eclipse seasons. It is going to be in Virgo on the 21st of September, right before the Libra equinox. Let's talk about it. I am Kristalyn Sophia. I am an astrological magician, an astrologer, and a folk magician. And I'm going to share with you today the nitty-gritty details of the astrology here based on tradition and ancient astrology. And then we'll bring it into the present and talk a little bit about what can we, if anything, do around the energy of this eclipse. Okay, so here we have the chart of the eclipse, which is going to happen on September 21st, 2025 at around 3:54 p.m. The thing here, though, is that this eclipse is not going to be visible from the United States. So I've cast this chart for the United States because that's what you would do. You cast the chart for the place of your location or for the center of power in whatever area or space or country you are living in. And that could be if you're in your individual state or a province or a section of a nation. You could do it for the most influential city in that more location or more local area for you. I'm doing it in Washington, D.C. because A, that's actually very close to me by proximity, but also it counts for the United States of America where I live. So again, this is going to be a little bit different. If you do not live in the United States of America, you'll want to cast it for whatever is considered the capital or the center of governance in your space. So what we have here is the eclipse happening, of course, in about the middle of the afternoon. So you can see this MC here represents where the sun would have culminated that day, and the sun has made progress since then. So it's been a few hours. We are halfway between the point of culmination of the sun and the point of setting of the sun. The rising sign is going to be in Capricorn, which, if you're looking at eclipse delineation techniques, especially by Claudius Ptolemy in the books Tetrabiblos, then that would be important as well. We would take that into consideration. It's also an eclipse in Virgo. So the ruler of Virgo is Mercury. Mercury has made their way into Libra by this point. So these give us context clues and refine our definition and delineation of the eclipse even further. It is a solar eclipse, and by definition, solar eclipses are thought to have more impact for leadership and leadership positions. So this is where you're going to want to look to who's in charge here and how are they being affected, whether it's on the larger scale of an entire nation or in the office that you work in or situations like that. You will see what the universe kind of considers leadership at that point, because sometimes it is the person that is the figurehead, and then sometimes it's the person that the people listen to the most. So it's interesting as a study to pay attention to what actually does go on and what changes do occur around a solar eclipse, just to see like who is the actual leadership we're seeing affected here. So again, on a larger scale, that's what we're seeing. And because it is in that 29th degree, it is within the 3 degrees of grace that I would give to being in contact, as we see, with this outer planet aspect that's going on. So it's kind of bringing that in as well. We might notice that events surrounding this eclipse kind of do give us information that are pertinent to the next few years as these outer planet aspects are doing their work as well. And one of the things you'll notice very close is that even by sign, we have at 29 degrees, of course, the eclipse, but opposite of that, we have Saturn at 28. And so this is a separating aspect, but Saturn is now halfway through Saturn's retrograde phase. Saturn is changing phases. And so this is a pertinent point for Saturn, who, if we recall, is the ruler of the chart for this location for the eclipse. So that's something to notice as well. There may be a turning point, there may be sort of a middle ground kind of situation that happens, just metaphorically representing Saturn in the middle of this retrograde cycle for what Saturn, where Saturn is and what Saturn is doing. When we think about Mercury, who is not able to see the eclipse, that's one thing that we'll think about as well. Mercury, in this case, is not really dignified, doesn't have much detriment, might be considered to have some triplicity, although Mercury is actually the air triplicity ruler of nighttime charts, and this is still during the day. But it is the ruler of Virgo. And so we are seeing that. We're also noticing that Venus at this time is in fall in Virgo. She is exalted in Pisces. So being opposite of that, she's in fall. Venus, of course, representing our divine feminine situations. So we might see some situations where there's feminine energies challenging things or feminine energies being challenged. It's something that could come up. And again, astrology is best done as a predictive technique in curiosity, right? We're going to know so much more in hindsight about this than we will at the actual event, where we can make archetypal predictions like we're doing right now, but none of this is saying this is absolutely going to happen because we are people trying to interpret the sky. So we will know more in hindsight for sure. But these are some good guesses that we can make for the nature of what we will see around that time. Also taking into account that by Ptolemy's calculations, this eclipse actually will not be starting anywhere near the effects of the eclipse will not be starting anywhere near the actual date of the eclipse. So Claudius Ptolemy gave us this equation, which is really fascinating, that uses what is in the sky of the eclipse, and we can tell on a chart what is in the sky because it is between the AC, which is the rising point, it's the eastern horizon, and the DC. And the DC is the western horizon. So think sunrise point, sunset point, and of course the sun is in the middle of the afternoon at this point. So it would have risen here, gone up, over, and will eventually set over here. Because it is in that middle part of the afternoon, that puts it in the last third of the hemisphere that we are able to look at to derive timing. So if we think about timing for this eclipse, we're actually going to be looking at something that begins, it's in the second, or actually I would place it in the third. So it will begin almost up to a year from this date. So it's going to be a while before we actually see the effects of this eclipse, if because it is not visible to our locality in the United States and North America and even South America, it's really most visible to Antarctica and New Zealand. So because it's not visible, if we see effects, we will not see them for likely 8 months to a year from September 21st. And then to narrow that down, we would look to the eclipse and how long it lasts. So this eclipse is actually quite a long one. According to space.com, it's going to last about 4 hours and 24 minutes. And so that will translate if we go 1 hour equals 1 year, because that's what you do for solar eclipses. Lunar eclipses will be for months. If we do this calculation and convert it, it will be 4 years, 4 months, and 24 days or so. So that means that if the eclipse begins in roughly a year, it will last for 4 years and let's just say 5 months past that point. So we are looking now going into 2030 at this rate. And then, of course, we will see the intensifications in the third of that period. So in, later in the 2028 to 2030 time range, we would see the most intense effects occurring that are actually the significations that this eclipse is being the omen of. So that's how it works. That's how astrology kind of unfolds the timing of this event. And the reason for that is back in the way back days, they could notice an eclipse, but they didn't quite have predictability for eclipses as we do today. And so there was a time where they knew an eclipse happened because it was happening. So they couldn't say, well, the eclipse is going to happen, and therefore that's going to be the day that its significations come to pass. They didn't have that. So they saw the eclipse and they knew that eclipse was an omen of something that would come to pass. And then they could derive when the thing the eclipse was heralding would come to pass based on these calculations. So that's kind of how that works. And of course, if we're looking at what is this going to be affecting, it's in the sign of Virgo. So if we start with our basics and think about Virgo, Virgo is, believe it or not, a humanistic sign. It's a human sign. It is the Virgin. It's a more northern sign. It's terrestrial. And so it also is considered in some cases to have wings. Virgo will have wings on occasion. And it's a common sign. And this one is in the middle here between the midheaven and the descendant. So it's hard to kind of pick out which signification it's leaning towards the most. So we're looking at something that could affect human beings. It can also affect earthquakes, winged animals, especially those used for food. These are all according to Claudius Ptolemy and Tetrabiblos. And then so we might also see humans and kings having an effect here. Of course, it's a solar eclipse. If it leans more towards the midheaven, we might see effects on rights, kings, and those of middle age. But if we're leaning more towards the descendant, and it'll be good to observe, right? What do we notice actually is more impacted so we can get more refined in our calculations in the future? Those near the DC, according to Ptolemy, show changes of customs, old age, and the dead. So that's going to be curious too to see if this is leaning towards the descendant for its placement. And again, it's in the middle. We may get neither, we may get both. It's something that we have to observe to be able to understand. And so with this, we can say, this is what the book says we might expect. What actually happened? How does that compare in that? How does that educate our understanding of the ancient texts and the actual application of this timing? So these are things to keep in mind. And of course, I'm keeping my eye on that opposition from Saturn, even though it is separating, it is the aspect the moon made previously. And now the next aspect the moon will make is going to be to the conjunction, it looks like, with Mercury, which is the lord of the eclipse. And so Mercury is going to be our next step along the way. So if I were to talk about this in manners of what can we do every day and notice about this, the solution to things, whatever this eclipse brings, it might bring barriers that we are now having to break through. And the best way to break through them is to quote Hamilton and write your way out, or to discuss things, have clear communication, have fair communication. Mercury is in Libra. And so if there is conflict, as we see Mars is there as well, we want to see what win-win can we establish? What compromise can we establish? How can we communicate our needs on both sides very clearly and then come up with the most effective and fair strategy moving forward? So that's your, like I said, nitty gritty astrology about this event, which is so cool, right? Now let's talk about the folk magic. Now, this is a solar eclipse. It is considered to be the sun kind of corrupted and the moon kind of corrupted. So according to sources like the Picatrix, we would not want to do magical workings around this time. You wouldn't want to ensoul a talisman. You wouldn't want to really exert your will magically on something. However, we can still do things where maybe we are listening rather than acting. And so think about ways that you can listen to your spirit guides. Think about ways that you can listen through divination and taking cues from whatever guiding energies are working with you to say, what should I be paying attention to? What am I paying attention to? What should I be paying attention to? And what is my next most aligned step? And in fact, that is the affirmation that I have kind of channeled in for this. I am prepared for my best next steps, and I am willing to take my best next steps. Whatever they are, they will become a lot clearer after eclipse season, and they might be on an entirely different path than we anticipated before. But life is always throwing surprises at us. And I hope that for you, this eclipse brings positive surprises and good things that move you forward, even if they are challenging, that these changes, that you can understand that they are for you and it becomes clear exactly how very quickly. So may you have a safe and wonderful final phase of the eclipse season. And may the equinox of the next season be something that brings you balance and peace.